Thank you, Alex, for being with us. We are now heading towards the third panel following this excellent presentation. We will open the floor for our final session, allowing all participants to engage with the teams of this panel. I'm introducing now Dr. Alex Green.
Thank you, Alessandra, and good afternoon, everyone, or good morning, where I am joining you from. So I have the pleasure of introducing this third and last panel for the day. This panel is a little bit different from the previous panels, mainly because the presenters are not able to join us in real time. So we have a series of pre-recorded talks by 5 different speakers, and we'll be playing those videos one by one. These talks, like the ones you've already heard, explore a variety of different issues dealing with sacred and spiritual landscapes across South and Southeast Asia. And we're going to start with a series of talks with the first 2 presentations are by researchers who themselves belong to the Hmong and Karen communities, the 2 largest minority groups in northern Thailand. So it's a real pleasure to have these researchers speaking about their own communities. And then from there, we'll move further and further away from Thailand, through Yunnan, China, and up into the Himalayan region with presentations treating sacred landscapes in Yunnan, China, and then Bhutan and Nepal. So we're going to start off with a presentation by Dr. Pao Vue. Pao was born in Laos but grew up in the United States, and he finished his doctorate in geography in 2018 at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. He worked on questions of resource management and heritage landscapes in Laos with the Hmong community to which he belongs. And so we have the pleasure of receiving a talk from him today, specifically focused on the role of spirits within Hmong practices of landscape management. So let's get started.
All right. Good morning, everyone. First and foremost, I would like to thank our host for inviting me to participate in this seminar, as well as to thank all of you for attending this presentation. My name is Pao Vue. I am a graduate of the University of Wisconsin-Madison Department of Geography. This afternoon, I am privileged to be talking to all of you on a topic that I am quite passionate about, and one that played a significant role in my doctoral research. That topic is Hmong environmental cosmologies concerning supernatural beings that govern the relationship between the Hmong and their natural environment, including the forest, lakes, rivers, and wild animals. While my dissertation actually took it a step further and examined how external factors, such as government policies, the market economy, and modern technologies have warped these traditional beliefs and how this in turn have affected the land. Today, I'll solely be focusing on just what are these beliefs and how they traditionally govern how the Hmong treat the natural ecosystem. A thorough examination of Hmong traditional religious belief is beyond the scope of this presentation. However, some understanding of key traditional cultural practices concerning spiritual beliefs and the wild are required to adequately examine and analyze Hmong beliefs about landscape spirits in Laos and elsewhere. Hmong cosmology consists of 2 worlds, the Yakyang or living world and the Yangkyang or the spirit world. Furthermore, the Hmong believe that all living and non-living objects have spirits that should be respected in order to maintain and preserve the delicate balance between the physical and the spirit worlds. In other words, maintaining a harmonious relationship with the spiritual world is core to our traditional Hmong beliefs. They traditionally practice a form of shamanism in which the physical well-being of a person is linked to their spiritual health. Thus, what happens in the physical world will affect the spirit world and vice versa. For example, Being startled in the physical world could possibly result in one or more of the startled person's spirits becoming frightened, fleeing the physical body, and becoming lost in the spirit world. When this happens, the person whose spirits has flown away will get sick and possibly die. Not only do individual objects have spirits, but entire forests, lakes, and rivers are also watched over by supernatural beings that must be respected. If a person offends a supernatural being, the being can either physically harm the offender, frighten away one or more of the offender's spirits, or place a curse on the offender. The curse is able to be passed from the offender to other members of his or her households or even villagers. Finally, a person should not commit actions that are considered taboo while in these wild areas. Many of these taboos are environmentally friendly in nature. For example, a person should not cut down trees or branches in a forest to build fire. Instead, he should gather branches that have already fallen on the ground. Other taboos include shooting rare animals, shooting at an animal again if the first shot missed, starting large fires, plugging up valleys and creeks, dumping waste, and burning certain species of trees. Committing one or more of the taboos will infuriate the supernatural beings and they will retaliate with force and severely injure or even kill the person responsible, as well as possibly the entire hunting party. This belief is what primarily shapes how Hmong traditionally view and interact with the forest and the available resources. Respecting these supernatural beings means that a person who has ventured into the forest to hunt or gather other resource goods must perform certain cultural practices associated with acknowledging and honoring these beings. For example, before eating their meals in the forest, a party member must first perform a ritual to invite these supernatural beings to eat. This is done by putting a bit of food onto a spoon, turning toward the forest, and chanting a personal preference version of the supernatural being's chant. As soon as the chant is complete, the person performing the ritual will then fling the food away from the campsite. Once this is done, the party can then settle down and eat. It is important to understand that performing the supernatural chant does not mean that people can then proceed to do whatever they want in the forest. They still have to uphold and abide by the beliefs and not commit any taboos. Although the Hmong historically and culturally believe in supernatural beings, there is a discrepancy as to the grouping of these beings. There seems to be three main groups of supernatural beings. However, these groups tend to overlap depending on villagers' belief. Also, it is important to understand that regardless of what group a particular supernatural being belongs to, the taboos still apply to all. In other words, committing a taboo will still offend a supernatural being regardless of its perceived group affiliation. So the first group is the forest guardians. The general title used to identify forest guardians is the Jubei Jukar, or spiritual ruler of the land, which is usually shortened to just the Ju, spiritual ruler or ruler. The title is followed by the name of the area. These supernatural beings inhabit and watch over an area or a natural geographical feature such as a lake, river, forest, or mountain. Generally, forest guardians will not bother a person in the forest if that person respects and has not offended the Tichu. A person can even call out and ask for help or assistance if he or she is lost and scared. Forest guardians usually stay in the area they are watching. However, they do leave the area in certain circumstances, such as when a forest guardian is being forced to leave the area by stronger, more powerful forest guardian, or in some cases by powerful magic users. Another reason as to why a forest guardian will leave an area is when the area has become so degraded that it can no longer support the forest guardian. The second group is the Date Dacha, or the forest spirits, ghosts of the land. Forest spirits are technically different from forest guardians in that forest spirits do not necessarily watch over an area permanently. Instead, they tend to wander from area to area in search of spiritual food. However, forest spirits will watch over and defend an area for as long as they reside in that area. Thus, a person walking around in a forest must be careful not to commit any taboos, even if they know that the area does not have a forest guardian, because there may be forest spirits nearby. Some forest spirits will develop a liking for a particular area and end up living there and watching over the place. As such, villagers sometimes will address forest spirits as forest guardians, even though the average area that a forest spirit is watching over is significantly smaller than the average area that a forest guardian watches over. Other times, a forest guardian is either not powerful enough or is watching over such a small area that it is labeled as a forest spirit. This overlap tends to lead to disagreements between villagers as to whether an area is inhabited by what spirit, and in some cases, what a particular supernatural being is, as well as will be discussed shortly. The third group is the Da or wild spirit ghost. This group includes evil spirits that have always existed in the wild. The Da have a particular preference for inhabiting wild and uncultivated spots, isolated groves of trees, and boulders, among others. As such, venturing near these areas could disturb these Daku, who will then attack and inflict harm upon the oftentimes unwary intruder. A specific type of daku is the Huanzong. Huanzong are spirits of deceased or presumably deceased people who were not able to undergo reincarnation and as such have become wandering evil spirits. These spirits are similar to the forest spirits in that they move around from place to place in search of food, but are different in that they are malevolent spirits that will cause harm and sickness to any person that crosses their path. Thus, it is extremely important to avoid any activities that will attract these spirits while in the forest. The similarity between the forest spirit and wild spirit means that villagers will sometimes disagree as to how to classify a particular supernatural being. So the next few slides will be taking a look at some of the better known supernatural beings. So this is the most famous. This is the New Vai. The Nuai is most commonly described as a creature weighing at least 20 kilograms and physically resembling a cross between a macaque and a gibbon. The Nuai is perhaps best known for its ability to shift-shape. While other supernatural beings also possess this ability, the Nuai is the only one spoken to have taken on human forms. In addition, Nuvais are said to transform into rare and never before seen animals in order to tempt hunters to shoot it. This belief can be compared to Western society's concept of protecting endangered species. If hunters do take the bait and shoot it, it will take that as an act of aggression and will retaliate with force. The Indo is another supernatural being. This one resembles a sun bear in shape and size, but without the yellow crest on its chest. It is also skinnier than the bear and has longer, thinner snouts and claws. Unlike the sun bear that walks mostly on all four, the Indo walks primarily on two legs. The Gonkoi is a small supernatural being about the size of a house cat. It is said to be covered in short, dark hair and walks on all four legs. However, the legs are splayed out similar to that of a monitor lizard. The most unique feature are its eyes, in that they are vertically placed with the lids closing from the side, instead of like human eyes. Gonkoi seems to have an affinity for water, and as such, their hunting calls are usually heard near lakes, streams, and rivers. The Gonkoi also has the ability to shapeshift, but unlike the Nuai, the Gonkoi seems to be limited to shifting between its cat-like form and an owl-like form. Of all these supernatural beings discussed, the Gonkoi cares the most about the forest. There are stories told by villagers of how the Gonkoi will cry for days when large patches of forest have been cleared. And finally, the Danzo is a supernatural being that is believed to have a daytime form and a nighttime form. The daytime form resembles a mouse or a shrew. These supernatural beings are generally encountered in disturbed environments, such as in areas where trees have been uprooted. When the creatures are disturbed, it is said that they will latch on to each other before fleeing the area. It is culturally believed that the creature will then curse the people responsible for disturbing and forcing them to flee their home. Many villagers believe that seeing these creatures fleeing in such a manner is basically a death sentence, and that those who witness the incident are fated to get sick and die soon. The nighttime is quite different from the daytime in that at night they take on the form of floating, glowing orbs. Of all the supernatural beings mentioned already, these the Danzhou seems to be the one who are most shy. Uh, so what these supernatural beings have in common are two things. One, they inhabit wild places, including forests, rock formations, water bodies, and other places. And two, uh, they all watch over both natural geographic features and provide protection to the wild animals living in those areas. Therefore, offending them could result in serious consequences and even death to the offender, as well as to his or her loved one and even other villagers. So the majority of Hmong households in my research area still believe that there are supernatural beings that inhabit forests, lakes, and streams. Many also believe that there is a connection between actions that are committed in the forest and some events that befall villagers in the village. For example, these supernatural beings could cause other villagers, and especially family members of the hunters who has committed a taboo while in the forest, to fall ill and die. This suggests that not only is the hunter putting his life at risk by tabooing, but he is also risking the lives of other villagers as well. Hmong hunters historically would go to great length to avoid areas believed to be inhabited by supernatural beings. This is especially true if the area is believed to be inhabited by a malicious or malevolent one. Uh, Perhaps one of the most important take-home message from this talk is that many beliefs associated with supernatural beings can be thought of as traditional biodiversity conservation practices. For example, as already mentioned, the new Vi is said to be able to shapeshift and transform into rare animals to tempt hunters to shoot it. A hunter that takes the bait and shoots at this rare animal would suffer serious retaliations. This fear has prevented many hunters from shooting and killing animals indiscriminately. This contradicts the long-running, seldom written, but often spoken narrative promoted by wildlife officials that Hmong hunters have always and still do, in quote, shoot anything that moves. The practice becomes even more crucial to biodiversity conservation, considering the fact that the belief explicitly discourages hunters from shooting rare animals. In essence, this practice was preserving rare, threatening, and endangered wildlife species. Along the same line of thought, the narrative that one must aim carefully to kill a forest spirit with one shot will risk suffering its curse is a belief that discourages sloppy, opportunistic hunting practices. Stories of how Gongoi can be heard mourning deforestation and forest degradation for days, or Danzhou fleeing and cursing those who have trampled upon and destroyed their homes, are traditional ideas that promote ecosystem and natural resource conservation. These beliefs are what primarily shape the Hmong traditional practices and how they interact with nature. So this presentation explored Hmong cultural beliefs concerning nature and how these beliefs have historically regulated how Hmong villagers in my research area in Laos view and interact with their surroundings. In all, the data collected seem to suggest that the belief in supernatural beings is still prevalent within the Hmong in Laos, and that perhaps the forest and its resources are still being protected and benefiting from the belief. However, beliefs are changing, and these changes are negatively impacting biodiversity and natural resources. Those are topics for another time. And with that, thank you very much for your time and enjoy the rest of the seminar. Thank you.